The Solomon Wealth Code is real. It is ancient, and almost no one alive today is using it. Not because it is hidden, but because it was quietly set aside inside the very institution that was supposed to guard it. This channel exists to recover what was buried, every principle, every architecture, every warning. And if you stay until the end, a prayer awaits you, one that carries the weight of 3,000 years of proven provision. Here is the truth that will unsettle you before we even begin. 96 out of every 100 self-described Christians are living at a financial level that cannot be explained by the manual they claim to believe. They own the most sophisticated wealth document ever written. They quote it at funerals. They read portions of it on Sunday. They post verses on social media on Monday morning. But the economic architecture inside that document, the precise, interlocking, field-tested system that turned one man into the wealthiest single human being who ever walked the earth, that part has been reduced to inspirational fragments. Greeting card theology, comfortable promises stripped of their operational core. This is not an accusation. This is a diagnosis. And the patient deserves a real answer. Not a devotional. Something more complete, more functional, and far more demanding. A working blueprint. That is what this channel delivers. And it begins right now. Before we talk about the system, you need to understand the scale of the man who built it. Biography is not the goal here. The goal is the economic case study, and it is one that has never been replicated in human history. 1 Kings chapter 10 verse 14 records a treasury report, an annual audit written into sacred text with the precision of an accountant. The weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents. That is approximately 25 tons of pure gold arriving every 12 months. And that figure, the text is careful to clarify, did not include income from merchants, from traders, from the Arabian kings, or from the regional governors under his authority. When you run the full numbers against every documented revenue stream, historians estimate an annual income in the range of $2 trillion in modern equivalent. Stop, let that number land. $2 trillion per year. An annual income from a man operating 3,000 years before spreadsheets, central banking, or global digital transfers. No venture capital, no stock market, no algorithmic trading, no business school degree. What he had was something more powerful than all of those combined. He had a system. Now ask yourself the honest question. If the same book that recorded that number is sitting on your shelf right now, why are most believers still financially anxious by the age of 40? Why do most Christians retire on less than they need? Why does the community that claims the greatest wealth manual in human history produce the least number of people who actually understand and operate that manual? The answer is not a lack of faith. It is a lack of framework. Here is what very few teachers will say plainly. The Bible contains two distinct layers of economic content. The first layer is the inspirational surface. Verses about contentment, warnings about greed, encouragements to give. That layer is preached constantly, repeated in every denomination, across every tradition. The second layer is operational. It is a complete 7-part system of wealth creation, preservation, geographic strategy, relational architecture, linguistic discipline, and calculated risk design. That second layer is almost never taught in full. The church is not malicious, but somewhere across the centuries, the economic precision of the text was flattened into moral decoration. Think of it this way. Someone hands you a master blueprint for a cathedral, and instead of building it, you frame one of the pages and hang it on the wall. The page is beautiful. The page is true. But the building never goes up. The architect weeps, and the people who were supposed to live inside that cathedral are still standing in the rain. The Solomon Wealth Code is the blueprint, not the frame page. Here is where it gets deeply consequential. This system was not invented by Solomon. It was given to him. 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 12 records God telling Solomon, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before you, nor shall one like you arise after you. The code is not a human achievement. It is a divine download operating through a human vessel who chose to apply every principle with extraordinary precision until the day he stopped. That stopping point is the warning built into the system itself. But that comes later. Hold this clearly. We are not talking about a prosperity doctrine. We are not talking about claiming wealth through positive confession. Seed faith formulas dressed in ancient clothing have nothing to do with what Solomon actually built. We are talking about a coherent economic operating system. 7 gears, all interdependent, all stress-tested across real markets. Real alliances, real droughts, and real human failure. The reason the church largely lost this system is almost mundane. When the economic texts of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes were transmitted across centuries, they were filtered through a purely devotional lens. Proverbs became an ethical anthology. Ecclesiastes became a meditation on mortality. Both readings are valid. Neither is complete. The financial architecture in those texts, the geographic intelligence, the diversification logic, the covenant partnership model, was consistently undertaught because it required a level of economic literacy that most theological training did not prioritize. Teachers taught what they understood, and what they understood was the moral layer, not the operational one. What was lost is recoverable. That is exactly why you are here. And right now, before we go deeper, where are you watching from? Drop your city, your country in the comments, because this wisdom crosses every border, every economy, every language, every currency. I want to know where this signal is reaching tonight. The first gear in the system is alignment before acquisition, and it is not what most people think it is. The common teaching sounds like this: pray first, then act. That is not wrong, but it is dangerously incomplete. Solomon's principle of wisdom first is not just a spiritual discipline. It is an economic positioning strategy, the deliberate decision to build the infrastructure of discernment before you build anything you plan to keep. Before the first transaction, before the first partnership, before the first investment. Proverbs chapter 2 verse 6 states, "For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding." Notice what the text does not say. It does not say wisdom is earned by hours logged or risks taken. Wisdom is given, and it is given through proximity, through alignment with the source. The person who cultivates wisdom before pursuing wealth will encounter opportunities that the purely ambitious person will consistently miss. Connections appear. Timing sharpens. Patterns become visible that were always there, but invisible to the unaligned eye. When you align first, you stop chasing. Things begin arriving. Now here is the verse that most teachers skip entirely. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 7 says, "The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight." Read that again slowly. Solomon is giving a capital allocation instruction. Of all the things you could invest your energy acquiring first, networks, capital, influence, real estate, the supreme first acquisition is wisdom. Because wisdom multiplies the return on everything else you will ever hold. It is the asset class with the highest compounding rate in existence. Unlike every other asset, it cannot be stolen. It cannot be devalued by inflation, and it does not depreciate with age. The second gear is geographic positioning. This one is almost never preached from a pulpit. Solomon did not build his treasury by sitting in Jerusalem waiting for God to deliver gold to his door. He understood something most people in his era, and most people today, consistently miss. Value moves. Prosperity has currents. Wealth flows through specific corridors at specific moments in history. The person who identifies those corridors and plants themselves there, before the crowd arrives, captures disproportionate reward. Solomon mapped where the economic currents of his era were flowing, and he positioned himself precisely at those intersections. His trade routes connected Egypt, Arabia, Ophir, and the Mediterranean coastlines. His navy operated out of Etzion Geber, a port chosen with meticulous commercial logic. 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 26 records that Solomon built ships in that location specifically because it gave him access to the sea routes leading to Ophir and its gold reserves. That was not fortune. That was deliberate geographic intelligence executed at a sovereign level. The principle translates directly. Where you physically, professionally, and relationally position yourself determines the ceiling of your growth. A person of extraordinary talent in a zero-opportunity environment will produce less than a person of moderate talent standing at a wealth intersection. Talent without positioning is potential that never converts. Solomon knew this before the first modern economist ever picked up a pen. He did not merely pray for prosperity. He moved to where prosperity was already moving. Ask yourself honestly, are you positioned where value is flowing or where value used to flow? The third gear is the system of seven streams. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 2. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. This is survivability architecture written by the wealthiest man alive at the time he wrote it. Solomon is describing the deliberate engineering of a provision system with no single point of catastrophic failure. Most people have one stream, one job, one client, one income source, one market, and they call it stability because it has been reliable for 11 consecutive months. Solomon called that exposure because stability built on a single pillar is not stability. It is a countdown. 7 streams is not a wealth maximization strategy in the first instance. It is a collapse prevention strategy. You build it not because you expect disaster, but because you respect the mathematical certainty that disruption eventually arrives for everyone. And when disaster does not come, the 7 streams compound quietly and relentlessly into something extraordinary. The architecture built for protection becomes the architecture that produces generational abundance. If this wisdom is resonating, if something deep in you recognizes this as the framework you have been searching for, take a moment right now and like this video, because what comes next goes even deeper into the system. The fourth gear is the covenant of mutual need. It has a name and a face in Scripture. Most people know Solomon built the temple. Fewer know how he built it. He could not build it alone. Not because he lacked wealth, but because the raw materials for the temple existed in a kingdom he did not control. The cedar of Lebanon, the finest timber of the ancient world, grew in the forests of Tyre, and the king of Tyre was a man named Hiram, an ally of Solomon's father David, a man whose loyalty was inherited, but whose partnership still required active cultivation. 1 Kings chapter 5 verse 12 says, "The Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he promised him. There was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty." Here is what that treaty looked like in operational terms. Solomon provided wheat, barley, oil, and wine, agricultural abundance that Tyre needed. Hiram provided timber and skilled craftsmen, materials and expertise that Jerusalem needed. Neither party depleted the other. Both parties multiplied the other. There was no extraction. There was no manipulation. There was genuine bilateral provision built on a foundation of mutual need. This is the covenant of mutual need, and it is the fourth gear of the code. The modern distortion of this principle is everywhere. People approach financial relationships as extraction engines. What can I take? What can I use? What can I position for my own advantage? Solomon's model runs in exactly the opposite direction. The first question is never what do I need from them? The first question is always what do I carry that they genuinely need? Because relationships built on genuine mutual provision are exponentially more durable, more productive, and more resilient than relationships built on personal gain. Hiram and Solomon built the house of God together. No extraction model ever built a temple. Stop building networks. Start building covenants. The fifth gear is margin as a law of survival. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 20 states, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." This is not a call to hoarding, and it is not a lesson in frugality. It is a verse about structural breathing room, the discipline of keeping reserves that allow you to respond to opportunity rather than react in panic to emergency. Solomon is describing the architecture of a financial life that is never caught completely exposed. This is where Benjamin Graham's insight becomes a remarkable echo across millennia. Graham, the architect of modern value investing, built his entire philosophy on what he called the margin of safety, the discipline of never paying full price for any asset, always keeping a calculated buffer between your assessment and the reality of an uncertain world, always protecting your principal before pursuing your gains. Graham arrived at this principle through decades of market study and personal financial devastation. Solomon encoded the same principle in a proverb and lived it as a king. The same law, discovered independently, 3,000 years apart. That kind of convergence is not coincidence, it is confirmation. The listener who does not have margin right now is not in a position of temporary inconvenience. They are operating without a safety net in a world that does not announce its disruptions in advance. Market shifts arrive unscheduled. Health crises do not wait for a convenient time. Building margin is not timidity. It is the fifth gear without which the other six eventually slip. The sixth gear is intellectual capital as an exportable product. For this, we turn to one of the most underanalyzed diplomatic encounters in the entire Old Testament. The Queen of Sheba did not travel from the ends of the earth to see Solomon's gold reserves. She did not come to admire his navy or inspect his trade routes. She came to test his wisdom. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1 records that she came with hard questions, challenges, because she understood something most people in her era and most people today consistently undervalue. That wisdom, the living capacity to generate insight, solve genuinely complex problems, and navigate deep uncertainty, is the rarest and most valuable thing any human being can possess or offer. Solomon did not export cedar. He did not ship gold coins or spices. He exported answers. He exported frameworks. He exported a way of seeing the world that kings and queens across 3 continents were willing to pay extraordinary prices simply to access for a few hours. His mind was his greatest export. His insight was his most valuable product. John Wesley understood this dynamic from a faith and vocational perspective. Wesley's rule, earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can, was not a budgeting formula for modest living. It was a radical call to develop your intellectual and vocational capacity to its absolute fullest expression so that the overflow could pour back into the world as provision and blessing. Develop your mind, deepen your craft. Let your insight become someone else's breakthrough. Let your framework become someone else's solution. That transaction, wisdom exchange for real value, has always been the most honorable and most durable form of commerce ever devised by human civilization. The 7th gear is the one people resist most because it demands sovereignty over something they rarely consider a financial instrument. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21 says, "The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Listen carefully. This verse is not a formula for speaking things into material existence. Solomon is not teaching that you can verbally manufacture physical reality by the content of your declarations. That reading is a distortion of the text and a disservice to the person who needs to understand what it actually means. What Solomon is teaching is contractual credibility architecture, the management of your most underestimated financial asset, your reputation for precision. Your words are your relational infrastructure. Every commitment you speak becomes a load-bearing beam in the structure of trust that others place in you. Every careless claim weakens that beam. Every exaggerated promise adds invisible stress fractures. Every gossip cycle you participate in corrodes the foundation silently, until one day a deal collapses, a partnership dissolves, a major opportunity roots itself to someone else, and you cannot trace the origin of the failure back to its source. But Solomon could. He watched it happen in the courts and markets and alliances of the ancient world playing out in slow motion before him. The person whose word is known to be precise, who understates rather than overstates, who delivers before the deadline rather than after, who says less and consistently does more, that person carries a form of capital that no market correction can erase. Trust is not a soft asset. It is the hardest asset you will ever build. It takes the longest to accumulate, and it is the most difficult to recover once damaged. Solomon understood it as the final seal on everything else the code produces. You can have all 6 other gears running perfectly and destroy the entire machine with an undisciplined tongue. Now here is where the warning lives. The warning built directly into the architecture of the system itself. Solomon did not die in wisdom. 1 Kings chapter 11 is one of the most sobering chapters in all of Scripture. It does not record an external invasion. There was no military defeat, no economic collapse arriving from outside his borders. What it records is something far more instructive and universally applicable: a systematic, voluntary, incremental dismantling of every principle in the code from the inside by the very man who built it. He made alliances through marriage, that pulled him away from the geographic and spiritual positioning that had made him untouchable. He allowed those relationships, one by one, to redirect his worship. The very wisdom that had made him unconquerable was traded quietly without drama, almost invisibly, for relational comfort and political convenience. And the gears slipped, one by one, until the system that had produced $2 trillion a year fell silent. Charlie Munger called this inversion. The principle is simple and devastating. If you want to understand how to build something that lasts, study with equal intensity how things get destroyed. Munger applied this to business analysis and decision-making. Solomon demonstrated it with the entire arc of his life. The collapse of the Solomon Wealth Code did not arrive as a catastrophe from outside. It arrived as a series of small compromises from within, each one individually justifiable, collectively catastrophic. The warning inside the system is this: the code cannot sustain itself on human confidence alone. It requires continuous, deliberate, humble alignment with the source that generated it. The moment you graduate yourself from dependence on the wisdom of God and begin operating purely on the accumulated momentum of past success, the gears begin to slip, first slowly, then all at once. History preserved the code not through the formal channels of church doctrine, but through the lived traditions of the culture that received it most directly. The Jewish community that descended from the world Solomon inhabited developed practical financial wisdom traditions embedded in daily life. The Gemach, a free loan society built on the principle that capital must circulate without extraction. Money that moves through a community creates life. Money that sits without giving creates calcification. The Maaser, a disciplined 10% tithe functioning as a systematic giving reset, preventing the accumulation of wealth from severing the steward's connection to its source. And the Shabbat, a weekly mandatory full stop, a financial and psychological reset built into the very rhythm of existence itself, not as religious formality, but as operational architecture. These are not religious curiosities. They are economic shock absorbers. They are the institutional memory of three principles from the code: margin, mutual covenant, and alignment reset. Origen, the early theologian, recognized this deeply, writing that the Hebraic understanding of rest and provision was not ceremonial decoration, but structural intelligence, a rhythm designed to prevent the kind of relentless accumulation that detaches the steward from the source of all provision. C.S. Lewis, centuries later, observed that the most fundamental economic errors of the modern world are not mathematical in origin. They are theological. They begin the moment a human being fully believes that what they have built belongs entirely and exclusively to themselves. The code was never truly lost. It was preserved quietly, patiently in plain sight, waiting for the generation ready to receive it whole. We arrive now at the question that every principle in this system ultimately presses you toward. What do you actually do with this, beginning now in 2026, with the specific life you are living and the specific resources you currently hold? The Solomon Wealth Code is not a historical artifact sealed inside an ancient culture. It is a living operational framework. It functions in every economy, in every language, in every generation, because it is not rooted in market conditions. It is rooted in the architecture of reality itself. And the most practical modern expression of its full seven-gear system was articulated, without using that name, by John Wesley in the 18th century. Wesley's rule was deceptively simple on the surface. Earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. But inside that three-part sentence is the entire code compressed into a structure anyone can begin applying today. Earn all you can. That is gear 6. Develop your capacity to its fullest possible expression. The world does not pay premiums for average. It pays extraordinary premiums for depth, for mastery, for the rare person who is genuinely invested in the development of their own wisdom and applied it to a real problem that others face. Do not coast on yesterday's competency. The world you are competing in is being rebuilt every year. Save all you can. That is gear 5. Before you invest, before you expand, before you pursue the next promising opportunity, build the buffer. The reserve you build today is not inertia. It is the readiness that allows you to move decisively when the moment arrives. while everyone around you is paralyzed by the shock of disruption. Give all you can. That is the covenant reset, the Masaru principle expressed through New Testament generosity. Giving is not a tax you pay to maintain divine favor. It is the mechanism that prevents wealth from becoming the very idol that corrupts the system from within. It is the practice that continuously reconnects the steward to the source. It is the gear that keeps all other gears clean. Here is what that looks like practically, starting this week. Identify which gear is actually missing in your current financial architecture. Not which gear sounds most inspiring when described. Which gear is genuinely absent from your life right now? If you have multiple income streams but no margin, gear 5 is broken and everything else is exposed. If you have savings but no wisdom alignment practice, gear 1 is offline and the other 6 are running without their foundation. If you have ambition and capital and positioning, but your word in the marketplace is unreliable, gear 7 is compromised and everything you build on it will eventually shift. Run the diagnostic. Name the weakest gear. Address it first. That is how Solomon would approach it. Not with sentiment, not with motivation. With the cold, precise clarity of a master architect who knows that a structure is only as strong as its most neglected point. Here is the final truth about why you found this channel. The people who arrive here are not here by algorithmic coincidence. They are people who have sensed for some time, sometimes for years, that there is more coherence, more operational depth, more architectural intelligence in the ancient text than the Sunday morning version ever delivered. They are done with fragments. They are ready for the full blueprint. If that is you, subscribe right now. Every video on this channel is another gear examined, another principle unpacked, another layer of the code made operational for the life you are actually living. This is not a single lesson. This is a complete journey, and it has only just begun. Before we close today, I want you to do one thing. If you are able, close your eyes. If you are in a place where you cannot, simply align your thoughts with mine right now. Set aside the noise of your schedule, the weight of your to-do list, the anxiety of your open questions. What follows is not performance. It is not content. It is a genuine petition spoken on your behalf. Lord, the one hearing this voice right now came looking for something real. They are tired of fragments. They are weary of inspiration that does not convert into instruction. They carry genuine desire to steward well, to provide faithfully for the people they love, to build something that outlasts their own lifespan and becomes a blessing to people they may never meet. Grant them wisdom, not as an abstract quality described in a verse, but as a daily operative gift that sharpens their vision and governs their decisions. Open their eyes to the opportunities you have already placed in their path. Give them the courage to align before they acquire, to build margin before they expand, to govern their words before they negotiate, and to serve before they take. Let every gear of this ancient code engage in their life with precision and grace. Protect them from the error of Solomon's final chapter. Keep them humble. Keep them close. Keep them connected to you as the source of every good and perfect thing. And let the inheritance they build become a light in the lives of generations they will never meet in this life. In the name above every name, amen. Go in wisdom, go in provision, go in the peace that surpasses all financial understanding. If this ancient blueprint has changed the way you perceive the wealth hidden within history, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are dedicated to uncovering the legacy that they tried to bury. It is time to plant the seeds for your future. The next vault of wisdom will be opened very soon.